Okay, Floxies, what I want to go over today is a very important topic. I'm going to be talking about neuroinflammation and is your brain on fire. I've literally spent lots and lots and lots of hours on studying this material, neuroinflammation. I've gone to seminars on this topic that are delivered from the most elite professionals in this field of neuroinflammation. And in my opinion, from treating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Floxies at this point, neuroinflammation is one of the most underlooked problems that are affecting your condition right now today. So if your neuroinflammation, which means your brain or your brain on fire, is not being addressed properly, you are not going to recover. What I found clinically and the research states is these fluoroquinolones love fat tissue. And guess what all your brain is? It's all fat. So before you go on, if you're finding this on YouTube, click down below and subscribe to my station or give me a thumbs up on the video. What my purpose really is try to get information out to the community so that you guys can recover and actually know that there is a source of hope. And I like to say, where there is help, there is hope. So where there is help, there is hope. And I hope this gives you some insight on what's going on with your brain and why you're not recovering. Because a lot of people that come to me, it's kind of a dichotomy, meaning two opposite things. Some people come to me and they have like Achilles tendon pain and pain in their elbow, that kind of thing. And then there's a lot more people that come to me that are Floxed that come to me with neuroinflammation, neuro problems, anxiety, depression, you're not yourself. These wild swings of moods and you just don't feel like yourself. That indicates that's neuroinflammation, brain inflammation that needs to be addressed. So if you look in the literature, a lot of this stuff talks about tendon tears and Achilles tendons, and that certainly does happen. But clinically, what I've seen is there's a lot more people that might have a tendon tear, but now they have all these neurological problems that are way, way more devastating their life than the Achilles pain or the bicipital pain, that kind of thing. So again, if you like my station, give me a thumbs up, like, subscribe to my station, grab the link, post it on Facebook. We just need to get this information out because there's no other person that I know of in the Floxy community that's delivering information like this. So I hope you find this valuable, and let's dive into this. All right, so so today's topic, like we talked about, is going to be on neuroinflammation, and this is your brain, and all this stuff around here is different things that cause your brain to be inflamed, or you could say that your brain is on fire. Now, one of the things that I want to let you know is your brain doesn't have like pain receptors. It doesn't say, like if you hit your thumb with a hammer, you're going to say, ow, that's painful. Your brain has no pain receptors at all. So when your brain is giving you symptoms, it's telling you maybe you have fatigue. Maybe you read something and your brain fatigues out. Maybe you read something and you can't remember it. You have brain fog. Maybe you have anxiety. Maybe you have depression. Maybe you have your heart racing. Maybe you have these weird thoughts that can lean towards suicidal thoughts or thoughts that are just not characteristic to you before you were being Floxed. These are all signs that your brain is on fire. So your brain doesn't say, ouch, I have a pain. It has these other neurological symptoms. Now, one of the really big things is chronic pain, right? Or not chronic fatigue. Because when your brain's inflamed, right, the neurons fire, but they fire a lot slower, and when they fire, it requires a lot more work. It'd be like this. If you're going to go to work and you drive your car and you have your emergency brake on halfway, it uses more gas, right? When your brain is on fire, what happens is for the same neurological function, your brain has to work 10, 20, 100 times more, leaving you chronically fatigued, brain fog, brain fatigue. You can't read something, you don't remember what you saw, and all these other weird neurological symptoms. But I do believe that there's a lot of answers and there's a lot of hope for you with functional medicine. All right, so how do you know if you actually have brain, how do you know if your brain is actually inflamed here? So we have subtle, moderate, and then severe neuroinflammatory symptoms. So you can see right here, subtle would be brain fog, noticeable variations in mental speed, reduced brain endurance, meaning that you can't read as long, or maybe when you're driving, here's a common one too, is when you're driving, you get fatigued. Right, when you're driving, just driving fatigues your brain out, because when you're driving, you have all these different things coming at you. You have to pay attention to different things that are coming at you, and that can really strain your brain. So brain fatigue's a big one. Exposure to certain chemicals. Brain fatigues after exposure to specific proteins like foods. Now here we have moderate brain inflammation. We have depression, inability to concentrate, especially for long periods of time. Sleeplessness. Now here, how many people are out there that have been floxed that say, I can't sleep? I have 2 new cases that just just in the last couple of days, horrible insomnia. No matter what they do, they can't sleep. And what's the missing particle? What's the missing ingredient? No one looked at their brain. No one looked for neuroinflammation. It's just not out there. Lethargy, fatigue, lack of motivation, appetite, loss of appetite, and just generally not feeling well. Now, this is when you have severe neuroinflammation, coma, seizures, difficulty speaking, tremors, trembling, and tremors. So this is a sign that you have significant neuroinflammation. You reach out for something, and you start to shake just like this. Okay, you're shaking just like this, or you've lost balance. And when you're walking, you just feel like you're off balance. Or maybe when you're driving now, you get car sickness where you didn't. All these are indication that your brain's inflamed and there's some kind of damage that's happening in your brain. Okay, so this is, there's a variety of different testings out there. And if you watch any of my videos, I go over different testing. Now, this is a really cutting edge testing to see the integrity of your brain. So this right here is called blood-brain barrier permeability. So this is a test that checks to see if your brain is actually falling apart, to see if you have leaky brain. So how does this work? Let me get my pen here. So you can see this right here. This is a little segment of your brain that's coming over in here. Then what we're looking at right here is we're looking at this section right in here. So what happens here is when you have the brain barrier that's starting to break down, this is your neuron right here, okay, this like vanilla, and then you see this kind of like pink line right here, that's part of your blood-brain barrier. So when this starts to deteriorate and you get leaky gut, these particles end up in your bloodstream in here. So when we do this test here for the blood-brain barrier protein, we can actually see if these neurons, right, this is part of your neurons, and the blood-brain barrier here have ended up in your bloodstream. If they have, you can see right here, this is positive, out of range. So if you do this test and this tells you that your blood-brain barrier is broken down, now this tells you like your case went from here, the blood-brain barrier, your case just went to way up here, went way higher, way up here now. Why? Because we actually have clinical test data that says that your blood-brain barrier is breaking down, and these fluoroquinolones tear apart your blood-brain barrier. They are just crazy on the blood-brain barrier. So this is a new cutting-edge test that we do that checks the integrity of your blood-brain barrier. Now this is just another visual right here. Again, what you're going to see right here, this is your bloodstream, and this right here, I like this, I pulled this off of Google. What you're going to see here is drug molecule, right? So if you know this fluoroquinolones, these are in your body. Then what happens is they cause severe blood-brain barrier leakage. Now look over here. This is when you've taken the drug. You see these big things right here. This is what we call leaky gut right here, or leaky brain. You see how they're not there? These fluoroquinolones actually destroy the blood-brain barrier, and then these drugs get immediately into your brain. This is neuron tissue here. And guess what? Guess what? When they get into your brain, it does what? It destroys the mitochondria in your neuronal cells. It destroys the mitochondria. Your neurons are gone, and then you have all these neurological symptoms. Now, one of the things that I want to say about your brain is, if I scratch my skin right here, there's millions and millions of skin cells that are flaking off, and they will rebuild themselves. Every cell in your body can be reborn except one area, which is what? Between the two ears, your brain. Once a neuron dies, that neuron is dead forever. You can't regenerate new neurons. Like, you can have your liver, you can have a portion of your liver taken out, and you can actually remake a new liver, right? Every time your digestive system is broken down, it heals, but your brain does not heal. Once those cells are damaged and have neuronal death, they do not come back, unlike like your skin cells. So this is why the neurology of your brain and knowing if your brain's inflamed or not is very, very critical. Here, you can see right in here, this is going to be, I like this right here. I'm not a big fan of that pen. Let me change my pen here. So right here, this is your blood-brain barrier. It's 1 cell thick. All right, 1 cell thick. Now right here, this is going to be your stomach. This is your gut barrier. Now right over here, this would be where the food would be. This is 1 cell thick. Now, why is 1 cell thick so critical? Now, if you cut your finger right here, you literally have to go through 10,000 skin cells. You literally have to go through 10,000 skin cells to get to your blood, right? So you cut your finger, 10,000 skin cells. To get to your brain, for the outside, because when you eat food, that goes in your bloodstream. To get into your blood-brain barrier is 1 cell thick, 1. Cut your finger, 10,000, 1,000, whatever it is. Your gut is 1 cell thick. So these are very, very weak barriers, and they're very susceptible to fluoroquinolones, food sensitivity, inflammation, and it goes on and on and on. So this right here, the barrier is only 1 cell thick, so it's not a very solid barrier. Now, this is what I'm going to be talking about here now. This is what we call glia cells. So this is the leading research. So, okay, so here what I want to talk about is glia cells. Now, just want to stay with me here, and I'm going to explain this so you don't get confused. So in here, you're going to see a neuron right in here. Okay, this is the yellow part. That's a neuron. Then everything else is just grouped together called these glia cells. So this thing right here called the Schwann cells are glia cells. Oligodendrocyte is classified as a glia cell. Microglia is a glia cell, and this astrocyte is a glial cell. Now, and then the neuron here is not considered a glia cell. So just stick with me right here. So what the research is showing is when it comes to your brain, is 90% of your brain are these glia cells. And only 10% are actually neurons. So let me just flip to that. So let me draw this out. So only 10% of your brain tissue is actually the neuron. That's it. The other 90% are glia cells. So the Schwann cells, oligodendrocytes, the microglia cells, and the astrocytes. 90% of your brain tissue makes up the glia cells. Now, why is that so significant? So I'm just going to kind of give you a visual. I have these spoons right here, okay? So this is the glia cells, and I'm going to kind of describe on what they do. At the end of the day, the glia cells is what we're actually after when we need to decrease your neuroinflammation or your brain on fire. So we have this right here, the glia cells. There's 9 spoons here. And then we have 1 neuron here. So we have 1 neuron sitting right here. 90% of your nervous system tissue is glia cells. Only 10% is actually the neurons. 90, 10. So what are we after? We're after this 90, because this 90 right here, if your body's inflamed, if you have neuroinflammation right here, and that's what these guys do, they are your immune system of your brain. Okay, the immune system of your brain. If these guys are activated, guess what's going to happen to your 10%? You have 90% coming here and killing and eating your neurons. This is neuroinflammation. So this is the newest research right here. So this is why right here, we need to be concerned with your glia cells because they're 90% of your brain. Only 10% right here is your actual neurons. Okay. Now, when we talk about the glia cells, which is the swan, the oligodendrocyte, astrocyte, and microglia cell, those cells have to do with how much inflammation and what kind of a reaction is going to have in your body. So if you have neuroinflammation, if you have brain inflammation, if your brain's on fire, these guys right here are very, very active. They're like the Pac-Man going around and actually eating away at your neurons. So what we need to do, we need to eliminate, right, the 90% so we can spare the 10%, and then we need to restore the 90%, calm that down, fix this up, and then we need to restore your 10%, the actual neurons. That's what we do when we talk about neuroinflammation. That's what I do in my practice. All right, so this is just a research article. It says glia. Glia just means glue. So back in the day, they just thought that these things, you can see the astrocytes here, oligodendrocytes, microglia, they just thought that they glued the 10%, right? They just thought that the glia cells just glued these neurons together. Well, the research shows they do a heck of a lot more than that, and they actually control your whole immune system. So in here, this is interesting. If you read this here, it says the human brain has almost 90%, and the elephant brain consists of 97% glia. So 90% of the human brain is these glia cells. So we want to make sure that these are functioning normally, and we decrease the inflammation. This is just another visual. So I like this as a little slice of the brain. So this is the 90%. This is the neuron. Okay, this is the one spooner right here. This is the one spoon right here. Then the rest of this stuff right here, is your microglia, and you see here how this part of your glial cells called the astrocyte here wraps around your bloodstream. So guess what here? If this is occurring, if this bloodstream is leaky or if you're inflamed, all this inflammatory processes gets on this astrocyte, which is part of the glia component, right? So the glia is a bunch of different things. The Schwann cells, oligodendrocyte, microglia, and astrocytes. They're all part of the glia cells. So this is just a good visual. You can see like the massive amounts of glia. Here's the glia, right? It causes inflammation, decreases inflammation. Now, if you're inflamed, this is going to increase your inflammation. There's the microglia. The astrocytes actually wrap around your arteries in your brain. So if you have chronic inflammation, your astrocytes aren't well, they're inflamed. This causes oligodendrocytes here to be inflamed. This causes the myelin sheath to be inflamed. And then that causes your axons, your actual neurons to be inflamed. And then you get all these poor neurological problems that you're having. Now, this is just another picture. I mean, I'm like a big visual guy, so I like to give you like multiple pictures so you can understand like what's happening in your body. Because a lot of things when it comes to recovering, when it comes to recovering from being floxed or whatever condition you have, like this principle applies to everybody. Like if you have any of these symptoms, your brain is probably, you have neuroinflammation. So I like to give people a bunch of different visuals so you can see what's happening. So this is just a different visual. So you have your bloodstream here. This is your blood. And look at this. I like this because it gives more quantity, your astrocytes. And then over here we have your microglia, astrocytes. You can see how all these are wrapping up. And then you have your little neuron right here. And you see when this is leaky gut, how things start to come in. And then you have, if you ever like done anything on like dementia or Alzheimer's disease, beta amyloid plaque starts to develop. This is when these things start to die. Now, what I want to do right now is I want to bring your attention to what we call this right here. These things right here are the microglia. Now, it's a little different color just because I pulled it from a different picture. But what the microglia do, this is healthy. You see how this has the arms right here? It has the spider webs. Now, when these microglia become inflamed, they actually start to die, and they become this right here. They call this primed. Now, and this is just a medical term for prime. So what we really want when it comes to our body here is we want normal, healthy microglia. This is with the arms. And then when these arms, they can start to travel out and they can do normal inflammatory process things. They can grab things that shouldn't be there and destroy them. Now, when the thing becomes small like this and round, what happens to the microglia? It doesn't have the tentacles, right? Those are gone. So it's just a ball that sits in one spot, doesn't move, and then it just produces a bunch of inflammatory markers, and this is when you get your brain inflamed. So you actually want these microglia cells to be like big spider webs, and they can move around your brain, and they can find stuff, and they can eat it, and they can destroy it. But when you have neuroinflammation, they just sit there and they produce a lot of inflammatory markers. Now, there's a lot of things that can cause neuroinflammation, just not being floxed. Head trauma. Did you hit your head? Any concussions? Micro strokes. A lot of people have micro strokes and they have no idea that they have micro strokes. This can cause neuroinflammation. This can cause all those inflammation in your body to start forming. Trauma, stress, emotional stress, divorce, job. All this stuff can affect your brain, especially if you are weak or prone to this. Now, what happens here? This is the normal microglia. What happens in your brain is this would be like an egg. You see, like an egg. Once you hard boil an egg and you go here, you can never go back to this egg not being hard boiled. It's physically impossible. This is what happens when you have the microglia, and once your microglia are damaged, which has to do influences your inflammation in your brain. This is like a hard boiled egg. You can never go back here. So, what does this mean? This means that we need to stop the neuroinflammation, your brain on fire, and we have to preserve the microglia. We have to preserve this 90% normal, decrease this inflammation on these 90%, bring this down so then they can start acting normally and preserve the microglia or the glia cells that we have in your brain. And we can do that through functional medicine. I do this all day long. Here's just another visual. Here's your bloodstream, and you can see here, this is the brain, the blue, and then you can see your immune system. This is the microglia and the glia cells. And then you can see when the artery is broken, you can see how it starts to inflame, and then you have all these unusual neurological symptoms. Now, I like this graph here because you're looking at what you're looking at here in this picture over on this side here is you're looking at like a hose. You know, if you cut a hose, you're going to be looking at the hose. So you're going to see the blood vessel that goes in your brain, and there's millions and millions of these blood vessels. So they're right here. This is the cut hose, and then you can see right in here, this right here is going to be this right here is going to be your junctions right here, and this is where they start to break away, and then all this inflammation, like it breaks away right here, and then you can see how things start to get into your brain. Now you see this right here, this astroglia cell, this here, which is right here. You see how this astroglia cell attaches right here. This is the endothelium. This is the artery lining right here. You can see that. So when these astrocytes are attached here, and if you have a bunch of inflammatory process in your brain, it damages this. It causes these astrocytes to go crazy, causes inflammation, causes mitochondria damage. Then the neurons don't fire right, and then you have a whole litany of problems. Now, this right here is a section of your gut. Now, if you remember, your gut here is one cell thick. So when God designed us, He designed our gut lining and our brain lining from the same tissue. So they act very similar. So when you look at this diagram right here, so this is your blood, right? And you can see that this is your bloodstream, and you can see right here, these are different things in here that they've designated this to be calcium and iron and blood, and these would be bad bugs. So you can see here, this is a nice tight junction right here, and then it starts to get broken up, and then a whole bunch of stuff starts to go into your so this would be your gut right here. Okay, so this is your gut right here, and then this is your blood. So when you eat food, you have bacteria, drugs. When you're inflamed, this is your gut. Now you see a whole bunch of bad things can get into your bloodstream right here and start causing negative food reactions, gluten, dairy, compromised immune system, nutrients, you get malabsorption when you have a gut problem like this. So when you get malabsorption problems, you're just not absorbing nutrients. A lot of flaxies have malabsorption problems just because their guts are totally destroyed and then their brains are totally destroyed. Now, how do you know if you have a bad gut? Well, and this is normal. So 2 to 3 bowel movements every single day of your life is normal. 2 or 3 every single day. No gas, no bloating, no diarrhea. You don't have to take any heartburn medication. That's normal. Now, if you have something other than that, you have leaky gut. Now, if you have leaky gut, you have leaky brain. Your brain's inflamed. That's just what the research has shows. Now, there's a caveat to that. Not every single Floxy that comes to me has a GI problem. Now, the research shows is 50% of the people that have, quote, what they call leaky gut have no GI disorders, but they still have leaky gut. So no matter what, every Floxy needs to be checked, needs to go through a gut protocol and most definitely a brain protocol to decrease the neuroinflammation in your brain. So this is a good visual. This right here, again, this is where your food particles are. You see the food particles, and then your gut breaks down and a bunch of bad stuff. There's bacteria that are in your gut, right? There's like trillions and trillions of bacteria in your gut. And when your gut's leaky, the bacteria literally go from your bloodstream, your gut into your blood. This causes inflammation. This causes neural inflammation. This causes your blood-brain barrier to break down, and then you have all these unusual and weird neurological symptoms that no one can actually explain. Now, this is some more cutting research as well. The vagus nerve is a nerve that comes up from the back of your head. I don't know if you remember, Christopher Reeve, Superman, depending on how old you are, you may or may not remember him, but he was the Superman in like the 80s, the early 80s, and he was on a horse, and he got bucked off a horse, and he damaged his neck, and his guts shut down. He was fed through a tube. Now, what happened? He hurt his neck up here, but his digestive system shut down because he hurt this nerve. He damaged this nerve called the vagus nerve. Now, you can see how the vagus nerve comes around here to your colon right here, and it moves all the way up into your brain. All right, so it starts here from your digestive system, moves all the way up, and this vagus nerve has a direct connection right to your brain tissue. So from your gut, that vagus nerve goes right in your brain, and has connection. Now, this is very critical. This is what the current medical research is showing, that bugs, inflammation can travel up your vagus nerve and right into your brain. So, I mean, this is crazy. Like, these bacteria can actually travel from your gut up your nerve, right? Up your vagus nerve, right into your brain. If you ever had shingles, and I've had the unfortunate event of having shingles, you know what that is? Shingles is a virus in your nerves that's exposed. It goes through your nerves and hits your skin. So these virus particles that are in your gut can travel up your vagus nerve, up your nerve, right in your brain, direct access in your brain, and start causing brain inflammation. So this is why 98% of all the Floxies I work with, they all have GI issues. They all have GI issues, and they all have brain and neural inflammation problems because that vagus nerve, direct highway right to the brain, one connection. You have a leaky gut. You're getting these inflammatory markers into your blood. That blood goes to your brain. Now your brain's inflamed. It causes all these glia cells, which you just went over, to start going after all your neurological tissues. Your brain starts to slow down, and bam, you have a whole bunch of neurological symptoms. And then no doctor can explain it. Why? Because they just haven't taken the time to learn it. This has taken me thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases, Floxy cases, to connect the dots. This is what my clinical skill is good at this point. I can look at a case, I can connect the dots, and I can take out the time. What's the most precious thing you have when it comes to getting better? Time, right? Steve Jobs was worth $8 billion and didn't do him a lick of good. Money doesn't do anything. It's time. You got to take out the time in recovery. Because believe me, I've seen people get destroyed with being fluoroquinolone because no one's actually taken the time to figure out the problem. So here, this is the gut. This is just a picture. It just shows you the gut has direct connection to your brain. Okay, so a lot of people want to know, What's the protocol? What's the protocol? What's the protocol? And here's the truth of the matter is there is no set protocol. All Floxes are different. All Floxes need something different. It's called an individualized, custom tailored plan. That's what I do. If you have a thyroid problem and you go in the conventional system, everyone gets slapped with thyroid medication. That's a set protocol. Everybody has that problem and it doesn't even work for people. So when people want to know exactly, doc, what do I need to take? What do I need to take? What do I need to take? I don't know exactly what you need to take. I don't know what your makeup is. I don't know what kind of symptoms you're having. I don't know what your labs show. All these need to be addressed when you're talking about someone that's been floxed or someone that has a difficult case. If you've been floxed, you don't have a simple case. You have a polytherapy case. It means you need a polytherapy approach, an individualized, custom tailored program. Now, I can give you some general guidelines on what I do and the nutrients that have been shown and clinically what has been shown and what I've used to help people. So all these things right in here, these are nutraceutical management of neural inflammation. All of these things here have been shown to reduce neuroinflammation in your body. And I have some information out on the internet that goes over some of these things, which I think has helped a lot of people. But when it comes to exact precision on figuring out what you need, that's why I set up these 20-minute discovery calls to see exactly how we can get you better in a quick manner, because there's no need suffering when there's actually answers out there. So all these things have been shown to help neuroinflammation and brain inflammation. Now, when I look at a case, I'm looking at all these things. What's your vitamin D level? What's your homocysteine level? This is the homocysteine level. The homocysteine level is a marker for DNA replication, meaning the range, for example, the range for homocysteine in standard labs is like 4 to 15. Now, you've probably never had homocysteine done because it's an expensive lab to run. It's not like it's not like checking your cholesterol. That's cheap, and they do it, and you get no information. In the conventional system, they run a bunch of cheap tests, and you don't get any information. Homocysteine is a marker that costs a little bit more money, but it's very valuable because it shows you, one, are you inflamed? Is your brain inflamed? And two, it shows you, are you replicating your DNA? Meaning this: if you take a copy of a copy of a copy, and the 1,000th copy of your DNA isn't going to be very crisp. If you have high homocysteine levels, that means when you replicate your DNA, it's not very crisp. So this is a marker you can actually look in on a molecular, on a DNA level through labs, through interpreting these correctly, like what's your DNA status? What's happening? So a homocysteine and A1C, you got to know that. Fasting insulin. Are you sensitive to foods, gluten, dairy, eggs? Do you have enough stomach acid? Are you on a keto paleo lifestyle? What's your inflammatory marker? CRP, sed rate, that's another inflammatory marker. What's your blood-brain barrier? Right? Do you have you ever had the blood-brain barrier test done? No, I mean, it's just you've never had it done. So do you have blood-brain barrier breach? Like if you do, like your case just went up from like a difficulty of, if you're floxed, right? If you're floxed, and now you know that you, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst flox, and we do a test, and you know you have a brain barrier breach, like it's broken. Your case has just now become on a 1 to 10 scale 1,000, because it's telling you that your blood-brain barrier is breached, and all these chemicals, all these inflammatory markers are getting in your brain and destroying your brain tissue. And again, you cannot regenerate new brain tissue. You can't. Like once a neuron's dead, it's dead. That's what happens in Alzheimer's disease. A lot of these neurons just die, and no one's ever addressed any root cause of the problem. So that's what we're really trying to do, is get the root cause of the problem. Okay, chemical sensitivities. Do you have chronic inflammation? 2 to 3 bowel movements every single day. No bloating, no gas, no diarrhea. This needs to be addressed ASAP. Are you doing any strengthening exercises for your brain? Right? There's a bunch of different neurological exercises you can do to strengthen your brain. It's called functional neurology. I do that. I give that to my patients. Look at your labs through a functional medicine viewpoint and hormones. What's your hormone status? What's your DHA? What's your testosterone? What's your estrogen, progesterone, your cortisol levels? Now, one thing I have noticed here, ladies, that if people have had a partial hysterectomy, you're more susceptible to damage when it comes to fluoroquinolones. If you've had a sudden pause of you were cycling and then all of a sudden you're not, that causes more problems because your hormones drop drastically quickly. So with women, I feel like women are more affected because their hormones just aren't there. You actually need good hormone level to support good neuronal tissue and decrease neuron inflammation. Okay, so that concludes this webinar. I hope you found value in this. I hope I brought some clarity, some understanding. You're not alone. You're not crazy. I don't care how many people that you've gone to and they've said it's all in your head. You're crazy. I don't believe that. I believe you. I believe that there's hope. Where there's help, there is hope. If you want some help in my practice, I do 100% of my flaxes that I see are all through what I call telemedicine now. It's like through the internet, Skype, Zoom. I have a whole library, online library of Floxed educational material. So I work with patients very closely. We do the labs. We send all the labs to you. You get them done. Everything can be done long distance. You don't need to come to my office. No flaxies come in my office. Everything is distance doctoring. So take care. I appreciate you watching my video. And where there's help, there's hope. Bye-bye.